official first episode of The Glass Cannon with Blade Airsman. I'm going to be your host. On today's episode, we are going to discuss the new NFL kickoff rules. If you haven't heard, the kickoff will be changing substantially, going from a dead play to a live play, making players relevant, and I can't wait to get into it. Before we get going, I'd like to thank our sponsor, who is non-existent. But this is an opportunity for someone to have had a moment here. I would have said many things for them. So, for anyone who's interested, here's a little opportunity for you. But let's start with this kickoff change. So basically, kickoff rules are changing front to back. So we're going to start with the reason. So for people new to the NFL, the kickoff initially was extremely dangerous. A lot of high-speed collisions, ripping heads off. It was pretty violent. So there have been numerous changes over the last 20 years to make the kickoff less violent, less collisions. But unfortunately, it's turned into a lot of touchbacks. So a touchback meaning they kick the ball through the end zone or into the end zone, and it either goes through the back of it or the returner takes a knee, causes them to come out to the 20, and then that was revised to the 25. And really, there's no play there. So a touchback is truly a dead, absolutely dead play. There's an interview with Andy Reid where he's basically telling, I think it was ESPN, that there are over 2,000 dead plays per year with kickoffs, and how if the NFL is looking at speeding up the game and increasing viewership and trying to make it exciting, why are they endorsing a dead play? It just doesn't make sense. So if the coaches are seeing it, obviously the players hate it 10 times as much, and they're right. The kickoff really is completely meaningless. It's not a part of the game that I try to race in. Like, I'm an avid football fan. I don't miss a second of the Eagles game when it's on, and I usually have the red zone on the entire time as well. But one thing I don't care about is the kickoff at all. I don't know who's on the kicking team usually. I could probably point out a couple players if I paid attention, but right now, if you ask me who the starting kicking team or returning team is for the Eagles or for any team, I would just be absolutely guessing. So, considering I'm such a big fan, to have a complete portion of the game, which is kicking, that includes punt and all that, but you know, the the kicking portion of the game being completely irrelevant to me, that seems pretty flawed and wasted. And I never really thought of it until I heard Andy Reid say that. So, um, the thought behind getting rid of it because of concussions and all that is a big point, to make the game safer. But they also want to make the game more fun. They want to make it quicker, et cetera, et cetera. They don't want to have players out there doing anything that's not valuable to that sport. And if it's just to pass the motion of getting to the 25, there's no point in anyone being on the field. So the new rule is going to take a lot of getting used to here. So the kicking team kicker is going to still line up on their own 35-yard line, and then the other 10 members are going to go line up on the receiving team's 40-yard line. And then the receiving team is going to have up to two returners, and they're going to stand in between that 40-yard line and their goal line and set up kind of a running play. So I assume the idea is to, kick the ball up and have it land around like the 5 to the 1 area and force them to return it. Now, the big, massive difference, and I can't understate, this is the biggest change here, is that no player on the field cannot move a muscle until the ball has been received or it hits the ground. So the returners can run around freely. They can run around in the end zones or wherever it is they are. And the kicker can run around freely. Just the kicker and just the returners. When he kicks the ball off, everybody stands still except for the kickers. As soon as they catch it, everybody can move, or if the ball hits the ground, or whatever the case transpires. But until that happens, no one moves. So that completely eliminates ripping people's heads off, blindside hits, a running start in general. So that dynamic alone, just the no moving until the ball is caught, is absurdly different. And I think it's an incredible insight. Like, what a great aspect. Now that play is completely alive. Honestly, I have complained about the kickoff and all that kind of stuff a lot over the years, and I have never come up with the thought of no movement until he's got that ball. I've thought of, I did like the idea in the CFL where it was like you can run up, but you have to give the carrier or the catcher, whatever you want to call him, receiver, 5 yards. You couldn't be within 5 yards of him. So you could run up, get close, he had to catch it, and then you could get him. And I liked that idea, but it was stupid. It was kind of gimmicky. It just didn't work. So anyway, this no movement, um, creating this running box to create an actual play, I think is going to be really neat. It'll be a lot on the kickers and the place kicking and strategically kicking the ball, which is going to be neat. So that'll increase the value of kickers a lot, which will increase the value of that position, which isn't a bad thing. Fair catches will no longer be allowed, so you can't do a fair catch anymore. Period. And if the kicking team does kick it through the end zone or creates a touchback, the ball will automatically come up to the 30-yard line. So it used to be the 20, then 25, now it's up to the 30. So they're trying to entice you to not take that touchback. They want you to create a play, catch the ball, and do something. Create a play, which I really like. That's awesome. Creating more plays that aren't dead will hopefully create more points. You know, if you get really good running teams or good teams with good, like Andy Reid schematics or Sean Payton, Bill Belichick, who can create these really dynamic, fun plays, maybe Sean McVay, um, I think that you'll get some very neat, reverse runs, or you got to know that they're going to implement the backwards throwing, the lateraling, all that kind of stuff into this. So it can get pretty dynamic. And that's going to affect a ton on the returner. You've got people like Cordero Patterson, Naeem Hines, Jalen Reagor, and Jalen Reagor sucks, but he's a pretty good returner, and he's fast, boy, if he doesn't let the ball slip out of his hands. Um, so, I mean, that puts a lot more value on those players in fantasy because, God forbid you get an excellent returner who's also a starting player of some sort. There was a time pretty recently within the last few years that Cordell Patterson was basically a starting running back for Atlanta, and he was returning as well, and he was dynamic in the returning game, and the returns back then sucked. All the rules sucked, everything sucked. So, you give that Cordell Patterson a chance in this new scheme, maybe not this year but maybe next year, I bet you he's putting up, who knows, like 3 touchdowns a year off of that. And three is enough to be like, it's relevant. It's relevant, especially if he's starting. So, yeah, adds a lot of fantasy, enjoyment there, opportunity, whatever you want to call it. Another major aspect is the elimination of surprise onside kicks. So no more surprise onside kicks. You can't go up and do whatever you want. You have to publicly announce prior to the refs which style you're going to be doing, regular or an onside kick. Um, Not 100% sure what that's all about. Maybe it's, I'm going to assume it's just to avoid breaking a new rule because you can't implement this new kind of shorter kick. You go back to the initial rules, the kicker lines up on his own 35-yard line, and then the other players on your team are in front of you at the opposing 40. So obviously you can't have an onside kick work with that. So the formation, which I don't have in front of me here, is obviously going to be a lot different for the onside kicks. Um, but yeah, onside kicks are pretty rare. Anyways, I mean, I guess we might see them happening more. I'm going to assume that the rules are exactly the same for onside kicks, and you just line up identically so that it's going to be equally as difficult. But we'll look into that. I'll bring that. I'll follow up on that next episode. Um, moving on. This was actually, and this is a fun fact. This was pioneered by the XFL, the Rocks minor league, which did go under. It's now part of the USFL. Um, but they had all these fun rules for, conversions after touchdowns and kickoff rules, and they were all inspired to be safer and faster for fans. So, just like the MLB and all these sports putting in rules to expedite the game, I love it. I love every aspect of that. Dead, I'm gonna go back to it, Andy Reid. You got it ingrained in me. Dead time, dead plays. I hate it. It's not good for TV. And I dedicate a lot of my time to the NFL and that screen time. So I appreciate that you care about, it being all valuable. Um, otherwise, I don't know how much more time that this is going to add to the games, if the plays are going to be, exponentially longer. But what I can say is that it sounds like it's going to be more intricate. So right now, like, I don't know what makes a good kick return team person. You've got your returner who you obviously want very fast and agile. Um, I don't know if you want them tall. You probably want them like medium, like 6 foot. Um, Running back style, I'm guessing, but just fast and agile. But then you're going to have blockers and you're going to have this and that. So I wonder if this is going to be a lot more physical, a lot more involved, and if it's going to end up wearing on better players. Like are the old linemen going to be playing in this a lot and doing designed running plays where they are genuinely engaging with big D linemen, because that's like not really happening on the kick return. They're running, there's a little bit of, blocking or whatever the case, but like if this is a 10-second running play where you're engaging with a D lineman or something like that, that's different. So, that ends up wearing on the players and probably creating more injuries and requiring more substitutions and definitely making the kicking team special teamers a lot more valuable, um, in every dimension, including their own pocketbooks. They should be getting paid more. So yeah, I bet you we see a whole new line of stats and a whole new just aspect to the game. Not to mention you're going to automatically see, a disparity in the teams that are good at this new kickoff and teams that are obviously quite bad at it. You're going to have teams, I would guess, the newer the team is, the less together they are, the less that their special teams are going to be formed because, if you're not a football player, you might not understand, or, a sports player, but when you play on special teams, you probably play on a different line. So, if you're on the power play, you're probably on the first or second line of your hockey team. When you're on the kickoff, you're likely playing offensive line or tight end or receiver or whatever the case. So it's not just your only job. You don't just show up and play special teams. But a little tweak is going to go a long way, and that's going to make this really exciting for this year. Every year keeps getting more exciting. We had 16 games. Now we had 17 games, and I think next year we're going to have 18 games. So, you know, I hear a lot of professionals saying, "Oh, they're trying to make the game a lot, safer, and that's why they're doing this kickoff." Well, if they really cared, they wouldn't add a game. And it's like the game is not creating unsafeness. It's not making the game more not safe. I understand, before everyone jumps down my throat here, that the extra game adds fatigue, adds wear, adds injury risk. Well, it doesn't unless you run your people too ragged. So no one's saying that you have to, add this game and not change a single thing to your team. You're going to have to adapt just like everything else does. The game is going to change. That's the whole point. They're not trying to, make the same game a little bigger. They're trying to change it to be better, different rules. They changed those overtime rules, which went into effect immediately. We got to see the overtime rules, work quite well in effect this Super Bowl, which, made it one of the most exciting Super Bowls that I've ever watched. So rule changes going with modern times is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. So what I'm expecting is that you're going to have a lot more higher quality substitutions. You're going to have deeper, um, rosters in terms of skill positions. You're going to probably have people that are only playing on the kickoff, but you're likely going to see less star players on your kickoffs now because they're going to be so violent. Now, are you going to see people like Debo Samuel as a returner? Of course you are. The guy's dynamic. He's wild. You're going to see these high octane players back there. I'd love to see Achan back there. Um, people like Devonte Adams. You'd love to see him there, but if he got hit the right way, he'd snap in half, man. He's too lanky. Like you're gonna need, um, Derrick Henry's a little too big and too slow for that role. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anyone who I love. Maybe like DeAndre Swift, Saquon Barkley. I'm not intentionally going to running backs here. I just their size, their speed, their dynamic, their versatility, their toughness. I think it makes them a really ideal candidate. But right now, if you look at it, your main return guys are receivers or speedsters, third, fourth string receivers, whatever the case. But they're always speedsters and they're slim. You're not seeing DK Metcalf out there returning kicks. So it's going to be really, really cool. It's going to be really, really cool. Teams that I think are going to exploit this and make this a big part of their game right out the gate. I would have normally said the Patriots with Bill Belichick, but he's Gonzo the Clown, so not them. But I would say the Eagles, and that's not because I'm a homer. That's because they are intuitive and dynamic with all plays, the Philly Philly, the tush push, etc., etc. They always think of neat things. As a fan, I have seen other trick plays in the books where they have guys laying on the ground in the end zone. I saw a kick one time. They had a guy lay in the corner of the end zone, Philadelphia, and guy receives the kick on, I think it was the back right hash. The guy in the end zone stands up, and he's obviously, maybe 5 yards behind this guy who's caught the ball. The guy pitches it back to him, and that guy just bolts, runs, gets a touchdown. Like wild, silly play, worked amazingly, whatever. Pretty sure the play ended up getting like called back, perhaps, maybe some sort of stupid blindside hit, like something irrelevant. But the play worked. And they try them in important games. The Philly Philly was in the Super Bowl. Like it's on the goal line. Like that's not the time to try those plays, and they do it. So I could see them creating and exploiting something neat for this new kickoff. Same with San Francisco. They have a crazy dynamic running game. So I could see them manufacturing some very neat plays out of this. Washington is wily right now. Washington, Baltimore, these are wily teams. They have really, really good running pedigrees. Um, Washington has had some movement in their backfield, which we'll get into on another show here. But yeah, I think perhaps those few teams I could see exploiting this a little bit. Obviously, Kansas City, just with the brilliant minds that they have across the board. I mean, Andy Reid's just a diabolical genius. But yeah, no, I could see them making plays bigger. So it's going to affect who I draft. I'll be looking come probably July, August to see what the kick return field looks like and who your standard returner is. Because I'll tell you, like in the fourth or fifth, if I'm between a couple players and one is a major kick returner, that could put me over the edge. Because I have high hopes for this. I'm thinking, maybe a guy sees 3 to 5 touchdowns a year out of this. Who knows? So, and I mean, the difference between Debo Samuel getting 8 touchdowns and 13 touchdowns is pretty big deal. So yeah, definitely relevant to me. But that's going to wrap it up here for today. Next week, I am going to go over coaches around the league. I will tell you all the transactions that's happened, head coaches, assistant staff, all that kind of stuff, the major stuff, anyways. I'll tell you who got hired, who got fired, who parted ways, all that jazz. But that's it. Have a good one.